ladies and gentlemen, it is start time. Are you ready for start time? Thank you, and thank you very kindly. It is indeed a great pleasure to present to you at this particular time.
It's your boy E-Dale, a.k.a. Mr. Factz, man.
That's Factz.
Kick the truth to the young black youth.
That's Factz. That's Factz.
It's your boy E-Dale, a.k.a. Mr. Factz, man.
That's Factz.
Yes indeed, man. Welcome to Factz, man. Another episode, man. I am your host, E-Dale, man, aka Mr. Factz. Today, man, we got a great show, man. Great topic today, man. I got my brother on today, man. Scott Knight back again. Scott Knight, are you there?
I am here. What's going on, my brother?
Oh, man, how are you doing today, brother? I got a topic that I need you to break down for me today and for my viewers today, man.
Absolutely. I'm here for you, and hopefully we can have a great conversation and generate even more conversation on this topic, because it's one that's very important and one that needs to be discussed.
Okay. So, look, how you been since the last time we talked, man, since the last show? I think the last show, man, is getting a lot of attention and a lot of streams that we did with the crab in the barrel mentality.
Well, first and foremost, everything that we wake up is a blessing to be given another day, another opportunity to strive for greatness in oneself and in one's situation. Wholeheartedly want to say thank you to all of your viewers that tuned in, supported us, and listened to the podcast. That was awesome. There were a lot of very good comments that we got, a lot of good feedback. Hope that we can keep that momentum going, and hopefully we can generate even bigger conversations on bigger forums as we proceed in life. Yes.
Well, look, man, for my viewers out there, for the people that are viewing this show, that are listening to the show, the little air y'all hearing, man, I had to catch my brother at the spur of the moment because I felt that it was necessary to talk about this. And he's just traveling, somewhere across the country. So Scott, I'm going to play a little clip for you because I'm going to dive right into this because we only have 45 minutes, and I need for you to actually, and I'm going to give you my take on this, and we're talking about community voting. We're talking about community politics, why our communities lag behind when it comes to politics. Why should we vote? Why shouldn't we vote? Who should we vote for? What should we look for when we looking for candidates and choosing someone to represent our community? So look, I got a clip that Stephen A. Put out a few years ago. I want you to hear a snippet of this clip for a second, okay? Just give me 1 second, and then I want you to tell me what you think about what he said.
Absolutely.
Every black person in America should vote Republican for at least one election. Stephen A. Smith is joining me now. Stephen, who are you trying to send a message to? Republicans, Democrats, African Americans, all of the above?
I go with all of the above. That sounds about right, but specifically the Democratic Party from the standpoint that I definitely believe that the black vote has been taken for granted, and primarily the black community is at fault in my estimation in that regard, simply because on one hand, we're giving one party our vote because they've successfully gone about the business of convincing our community that the other party, the Republican Party, is completely against the interest of the black community. And as a result, we've been very transparent in our support. We've boarded hook, line, and sinker. We look at the Republican Party. I'm not talking about every single one of us, of course, but vast majority of...
Now, hold up. I'm going to stop right there for a second, Scott. When you hear that, do you agree with Stephen A. with what he's saying?
Well, I think you got to put what he's saying into the proper context. I do agree with his perspective, and I do agree with what he's saying. Far too often in the black community, the black vote has been taken for granted. The Democratic Party has done an outstanding job of convincing the black community as a whole to vote Democratic, and that is typically what you see happen in many of the elections, both on a state and national level. So it's not to say that there are not good Republican candidates. It's not to say that there are not some good Republican policies. However, our community has really been conditioned to believe that the Republican Party absolutely has nothing for us and they don't stand for us. So we were always moving in a defensive posture when it comes to politics. So we vote Democratic because it's what's comfortable, it's what's familiar. But oftentimes you'll hear words like loyalty thrown around, constituent loyalty. This is our base. This is a Democratic area. Unfortunately, that word loyalty is, in my opinion, misused oftentimes because we follow blindly. And it's almost like with a lot of individuals, you may even have a willful ignorance because you don't even accept or even entertain the idea of a Republican candidate or even accept any of the things that candidate is offering. You don't even give them an opportunity to present that information. But that's not solely or wholly the responsibility or the fault of the black community or the black vote, because many Republicans will not come into our communities because they already feel like, well, there's no need. They're going to vote Democratic anyway. Like, one of the things that often disturbs me is you'll see some politicians basically already have an heir or an heir apparent groomed to their position as if it is their position to give and it's not the people's choice to elect. But we have to start really disseminating good information, and we have to start really deciphering that information within our community so that we can look at candidates on an individual basis, so that we can really start vetting these people, and more so, once you vote them into office, they have to be held accountable. There has to be some form of accountability, because oftentimes what happens, people get into the office with a lot of promises that are made to the black community.
So look,
a lot of promises.
Let me stop you before you go too far on. So when you're talking about the process and we should vet more. So what are some of the things that our community need to look for when we're vetting candidates, when we're trying to find a candidate or someone to represent our community? You know, whether they're a black person or whether it's a white person or Latino person. What are some of the things that we should look for and expect from candidates when we're trying to choose in our community?
Well, that is a great question, and it's also a multifaceted question. The first thing that we have to start doing is identifying the needs of our community. We have to really, really take a hard look at our communities and what is needed, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's policing, whether it's better health care, whether it's child care. We have to start looking at our communities and really holding them against our neighboring communities and saying, okay, what are we missing? What is it that we need that our tax dollars are not paying for in our areas? So whether it's your area schools that need to be redeveloped, we need to start really taking a hard look and putting those items on the table to be dealt with.
Right.
Then we must look at the candidates and find the candidates that are willing to address our real concerns and our needs. What we don't need is pomp and circumstance. What we don't need is an individual to come through and kiss the baby and shake your head and have a plate of barbecue or come to your fish fry and make all of these wonderful promises only to get into office and see funding that was allocated for our community get redesignated to other areas or to other projects.
And excuse me, but that's the frustration of the community right there. I mean, these things, these funds that are allocated to us that are going into other communities and that's not fixing up our communities. Look, most of the communities, like especially, I'm just speaking for myself as well. Let me just speak for myself. Where I live, I mean, we don't trust politicians. We don't trust government. We don't trust local government. We don't trust federal government. I mean, so look, sometimes it almost feels like you're in a win-win situation. So why should we vote? Why should we still vote? Why should we still continue to have the mindset in our community to continue to vote and still get out to vote and try to find someone to represent us?
Well, if I'm hearing you correctly, I think you're meaning to say a lose-lose situation.
Yes, a lose-lose
because
situation.
If we have to start raising and cultivating our own youth or our own adults from our community to stand up, we have to start cultivating our own activists and give them the platform and the tools, the access to the resources they need so that they can get into position so that they then can address our issues.
Right.
Oftentimes, most politicians are not from your neighborhood. Most politicians that are making decisions are not from your area of town. Because what happens, districts are divided up, and the Republicans have been very strategic in the way that they have redrawn districting lines to consolidate their power and their base. So what happens, oftentimes you elect an official who's not even an official from your area. So we've got to start cultivating our own officials, and we've got to start instilling the pride so that we can reestablish the trust, because we know that this young man or this young woman represents us because she is one of us or he is one of us. He comes from a place that we come from, so they understand our struggle. They understand our needs. Because if we're only putting in people that appeal to popular opinion, or they have the right last name, or they're the largest business owner in the city, we have to start addressing our needs, but we have to start putting our people in position.
And that's
the trust. Yes.
And that's why
I wanted. Is broken. You're right.
Right, but look, this is why I wanted to do this show, because I was once one of those people that thought like that and looked at it like that. Like I was just so grabbed, like, because I'm like, you look, if you voting in the black community Republican, I mean, you know what I mean, or you vote Republican, you don't vote Democrat, then it's like you're a sellout. You know what I'm saying? So it's like one of those type of things. I just don't think that we understand politics the way that we should understand politics, and I think that's why we're lagging behind. I think that yes, we have been convinced to vote Democrat, and we have been convinced to not trust Republicans, like they're throwing us to the wayside. Like Stephen A. said, like you mentioned earlier, they won't even attempt to even come to our neighborhoods. You know, so because I used to be of that mindset, and I used to actually think like that. And
here's the thing.
How do we change that level of? How do we change that mindset in the community? How do we get people to change their mindset to do some of the things that you're talking about and describing that we should do, or the things that we should look at? How do we change our mindset and focus the community to get them to focus on something else other than not voting?
Well, not vote. You're doing yourself. You're doing the community. You're doing your area a disservice. We have to exercise our right to vote, because there are just too many things that are fundamentally tied to the vote. There's too much money on the table that requires the vote. So we have to get out. We have to be heard, right?
Right.
One of the things that we have to do is, you got to understand, policies and procedures are only as good as the people that are in place to implement.
Right.
You can have the best of intentions, but if you're not implementing good policy, and if you're not following that policy with good procedures, then the whole thing is just a fiasco. Because unfortunately, there's little to no oversight. And that's one of the things that our community has to step up. You can't just put a person in office and then walk away and expect them to just do what they're supposed to do.
Right.
We have to have oversight.
Right. You have to hold them accountable.
We have to be engaged. You have to go to council meetings, to town meetings. You have to go to hearings. You have to show up. It's more than just casting the vote. Because if you want change, change requires action.
Right.
Action requires that you get involved.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. But we have to start cultivating the same way you do a basketball player, the same way the energy and the effort that you put into a young, talented football player. We have to support our young, gifted intellectuals. We have
Yes.
to get behind them and rally behind them and put them in situations where they can flourish.
Right.
But unfortunately, that is not the focus of most inner city or urban neighborhoods. We're more focused on young Johnny who put up 42 points and had a triple-double.
Right.
We're more focused on little Thomas who ran back a 98-yard interception.
Exactly.
We're more focused on how can we get these kids into a D1 school than we are to get funding for the very school that they're in before they can get to the D1 school.
Right.
We've got to hold them accountable on every level.
And look, you know what? I wholeheartedly agree with you. You know, and I think that our community definitely needs to get out there and vote because it's important to our liberty. I think that if we don't vote for people that view us as whole, that view us as human, you know, that people that view us as the same way that they view themselves, and their policies that reflect that, I think that those are the people that we need to be trying to vote in office, no matter the face color. Especially when it comes to the black community, because like you said, we're lagging behind, and there are things there are needs in our community that need to be attended to, right? You know what I'm saying? I go in the community. Listen, there's no community-owned businesses, and you know, we have a couple of like barbershops or things like that, but like the corner stores and all those things in our community, they're not owned by us. You know, the community's not fixed up. There's no green grass. I mean, you know, just the environment that kids are raised in. You know, I want to see things like that change. You know, so.
I have to stop you there and say I would be remiss not to say we have to take pride in ourselves and we have to take pride in our community. So when we see these areas that need to be cleaned up, when we see these areas that need green grass,
right,
you got to plant the seeds in order for the grass to grow, right?
Exactly.
You got to fertilize and water. You got to nurture that grass. So we have to start treating our community as a part of the greater body, because if we're not solely responsible for our area and for what's important to us, then what you're telling me is, well, we're just waiting for a handout, and the handout I disagree with. I don't think the black community is waiting for a handout, but certainly there are those that would willingly accept the handout. We've got to get up off the couch. We've got to put our hands in the soil. We've got to get our hands dirty. We have to start taking accountability for our own neighborhoods, and we can't depend on the government to come in and fix up our park. You know the park needs to be cleaned. Let's go clean it.
Exactly.
Because let's be clear. Who's the one that is vandalizing these areas? Who's the one that is littering and loitering in these areas?
The people living in the community.
We can't have it both ways.
Exactly. So that's and that's what. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
And I was just going to say, and that's why and where we have systems in place. But if we don't hold the individuals accountable, for example, your Parks and Recreation Department, how come this park hasn't been cleaned? How come the grass hasn't been cut? Well, then you don't need to be the Parks Administrator. You don't need to have this job. We need to start putting people in position that is going to actually hold people accountable, as opposed to putting people in situations where they are nothing more than a figurehead. All they're doing is collecting a check, and they're reallocating funds for their areas, for their community.
Special interest groups, and that's why I say
right.
The people in our community, we need to start researching these politicians. I mean, go to their page and see what policies that they represent, or policies that that they're behind or backing, or policies that they backed in the past. See if those policies represent you and the people in your community. Start looking at things like that. And look, I try to tell people to look a lot at their local elections, because their local elections, those are the people making decisions on your everyday lives, how you get paid. You know what I'm saying? Your company's insurance, all these things. Start trying to look into these politicians and these groups, special interest groups, and see who's backing who, see who's not backing who, and make a conscious decision based off that information. Don't make a conscious decision based off what someone told you instead of you researching yourself.
Correct. And we have to also start reaching across the aisle. You also have to hold, even if your candidate loses, the individual that has been elected is still responsible for representing you. He's still responsible for representing your area, your district, your zone, whatever you call it. So you have to now reach across the aisle. Mm-hmm. Even though I may not have voted for you, I'm still going to hold you accountable for the things that need to get done. And if you are not going to address our concerns while in office, then we'll make it our business to get somebody in here who will.
Exactly.
You have to. You gotta back the punch. You gotta back the punch with some power.
Exactly. And so that's.
You gotta back the punch with some power.
And that's what I'm on, because I want people to realize that your voice counts. What you feel, what you do counts. You know what I'm saying? Don't feel like because you didn't get the candidate that you chose didn't win, or that that he may not represent your community, and those things are true. A lot of times for our community, I still think that we still need to start reaching out and saying, hey, look, this is what we need in our community. You got elected, the people elected you, that's great. But look, there's still needs that need to be tended to in this community. Are you willing to tend to these needs in this community? And things like that. We just don't reach out. It's like we turn away. We say, okay, we're going to wait till the next election cycle. And then we wait to then to do our research instead of paying attention for in between each cycle of what that candidate is doing, who's raising funds for him, what groups are raising funds for him, because those are the groups that he's generally going to represent, those groups. So I think a lot about politics we just don't know. People in our community don't know, and a lot that they do know. So look, I'm gonna give them my community credit, because a lot of them do know about politics and respond to a lot of things about politics. But there are deeper things in politics that we should know and we should start to understand. From a perspective of policies and the procedures, the things that is going to affect your daily life, just going to affect your grandchildren's life, policies that will help create wealth for you to leave for your children, things like that. I mean, we need to start focusing on those things in our community, those candidates that back those type of policies.
We have to get involved. Everything that you said is absolutely right and fundamentally sound. But if we're not involved, if you are not engaged in the process, both before, during, and after the election, then we lose.
Exactly.
Far too many people believe, well, I cast my vote, my job is done. No. Now you have to come to meetings. You have to voice your opinion. You have to hold people accountable. We have to show up. We just have to.
Right.
Because if you continue to just willfully, blindly vote one way or the other, there are some very good white candidates. There are some very good Hispanic candidates. There are some very good Asian candidates. And there are some very good and phenomenal black candidates, both male and female. So we have to learn to take the visor discriminatory practice off.
Exactly.
Why does it matter if a candidate is a woman? Why does it matter if he's a man? If you are the person for the job, then you are the person that should be elected.
Exactly.
We have to start looking at this different, and we've got to be engaged, man. I mean, at the end of the day, it's our community. But if we're not willing to put in the effort, and if we're not willing to get out and address our concerns, we can't expect someone else to do it.
Exactly.
And just because a candidate is a Democrat doesn't make him or her the best candidate.
Exactly.
No more than it does if he or she were a Republican. But we have to start taking account for ourselves, and it starts in the home. You can't just come outside and say, well, there's trash in the park. Okay, you're right. But where is the initiative? Where is the community initiative to go clean the park up? While we're waiting on the Parks and Recreation Department, where's our initiative to get up and hold these people accountable? You elect a dog catcher in some counties.
Yeah, but look,
But
we
yet
do
you
have
all these animals.
look,
But yet you have all of these stray animals running around in your neighborhood. You go across town, you don't see that.
exactly.
But nobody ever thinks about the dog catcher.
Exactly.
So the dog catcher is doing his job at will because there's no oversight, there's no repercussions, and that's what happens to our community day in and day out.
Right.
There are no repercussions when a politician turns a blind eye to our needs. There's no repercussions when when our schools are leaking, the roofs are leaking, the books are old, the desks are old.
Exactly.
But yet there are brand new schools and brand new resources being allocated across town and in other school districts.
Right. It's like they get the resources and we get the hand-me-downs to our schools, you know. Oh, we don't use these no more. We'll donate this to their schools. You know, things like that. And we'll get the new textbooks and new computer systems or whatever we need over here, you know. So it's like we're always being pushed behind. Look, that's another reason why it's important to vote, man, to raise your voice. I look at it from a civil rights perspective because people were beaten, water hosed, bitten by dogs, hung, drugged, beaten and treated in every worst way possible so that you could be able to vote and get a free education.
I am glad you mentioned the civil rights.
Right. So
glad you mentioned that because let me make this point for you.
Okay.
The civil rights is probably the single greatest cultural event for the black community, right? Mm-hmm. It advanced us morally, socially, personally, financially. It advanced the entire community. But the civil rights movement is also probably the greatest reason why we vote Democrat, because so many Democrats were aligned with us for civil rights. So now you've seen your grandparents and your parents all voting for these heroes, if you will, because that's what they were. Those individuals at that time and moment in history, they were true superheroes. So that's why we voted for them.
Exactly.
But now, because we've watched our parents and grandparents vote this way, that's the way we vote. Because we've been indoctrinated in the mindset that this is what's good for black people.
So you agree with Stephen A?
I do. I do agree with Stephen A. As I said before, you have to look across the aisle and you have to start allowing the people on the other side, Republican or Democrat, no matter where you stand on the spectrum.
Right.
But everybody has a voice, and everybody should be heard, and everybody should be vetted. We should be looking at the character. We should be looking at the content of their character and their mind, because that, my friend, is what is important.
Exactly.
That, my friend, is how we can vet and determine who's going to be for us. But more importantly, we've got to start looking in our own community at the rising stars. And we need to start cultivating these young people to step into these positions, to take up the mantle. We have to. We can't expect, well, so-and-so he's been our county councilman for the past 30 years.
Right.
Just because something is familiar or something is convenient doesn't necessarily mean he or she is the right person for the job.
Exactly.
Sometimes you need fresh new ideas and new perspectives. Plus, you need to shake things up and keep things fresh. You need to get a new set of eyes on the books so we can know what's really going on behind these closed doors.
Exactly.
Because if we've got the same people behind the closed doors, the game is fixed.
Exactly.
The game is rigged, ladies and gentlemen.
And look,
You got to get in the game to know how to play.
Exactly, and that's what I say. People need to. I think we need to look at this from a different angle in our community. We need to start looking at it from a perspective of, let me get into politics, because you can get into politics no matter what you've been through in your life. You know what I'm saying? There are things you can do, ways to get into politics in your community. You know what I'm saying? And I'm looking at this from a perspective, and I know I'm taking a bit of a turn here, Scott, but I'm gonna go with I'm gonna take the try to tie this into like what's happening in Georgia still, right? Ever since the presidential election, right? Where voter suppression is starting to take place. Where you can't, they're trying to make it where you can't cast ballot by mail, or all these other things that they are trying to stop the progress of the black vote, because black people turn out in record colors and overturn the election. That's how powerful they are. So we need to do this across America and every community.
They're doing it. Texas just signed some of the most restrictive voting suppression laws into law just last week. It's happening everywhere. Gerrymandering, the rezoning and redirecting of lines of zones and districts so that the Republicans can consolidate power. They are doing everything that they can strategically because they are in position legally. What do I mean by that? They're sitting in the Senate, they're sitting in the House, and they have the numbers. And they are pushing through reforms that are taking us back years and years.
Exactly.
They are dialing back, because when the black community rallies and when the black community really stands up, the proof is in the pudding. What we saw happen in Georgia and in Florida in this last election, they want to cut all those avenues.
Exactly.
off.
What they're trying to silence our communities, and that's why it's important that we stop turning on each other and wake up and stop focusing on the small things, the things of right now, what you want and what you can have right now, and start thinking about putting people in places or helping vote people in places or organizing so that you could get policies in place that will help you to grow small businesses in our communities. Put policies in place that, like I said before, that will help you leave things to your children, that will help you, establish yourself on a higher social level. All those things in our community that we're missing. So I think that's why I think it's important to vote.
One of the things that has not been mentioned, we need to do a better job of participating in the apparatus of an election. What I mean is we have to become poll workers. We have to become poll watchers. We have to now take jobs that we need to put people in positions so that you're not just voting, but you are now a part of the apparatus, so that we make certain that things are run right. So now instead of showing up at your local precinct to vote and they have 2 voting machines out of 16 that work, that is by design. That is not happenstance. There's a reason you're standing in line for 4 or 5 and 6 hours in the urban neighborhood. It's because they want you to turn and walk away. So when you go and vote on the other side of town, you're in and out of there in 15 minutes. It's a very pleasant experience.
Exactly. So, and that's what I'm saying.
It's to the point. It's to the point. They don't even want volunteers to hand out water to people who are standing in line. And
that's what I'm talking about. They're trying to suppress our vote.
You got to pay attention. You We got to
Exactly.
pay attention, and we can't be distracted.
But I like what you said.
distracted.
I like what you said about people in our communities like working for organizations that working for the polls. You know what I'm saying? Things like that.
Right.
Working for these voting sites and in place. Helping especially the people in your community, but just helping everybody out in general. So what would you say? And I know we running out of time a little bit, but what would you say to people that says, especially a lot of white people, they think that there is no voter suppression for our community, and those policies that are being put in place are not to suppress our vote when actually they are. What would you say to people like that?
Well, the first thing that you've got to see and say to a person like that, you got to understand that everyone sees it, but everyone is not going to acknowledge it.
Right.
There are individuals who may even acknowledge it, but never do anything to change it.
Right.
Right? So you're dealing with multiple issues for one issue. All you can do is try to educate an individual, present them with the facts, articulate that situation as best as possible so that that individual understands clearly. But oftentimes it's very hard for the privileged to see what it's like to be non-privileged.
Exactly.
Oftentimes it's very hard for the privileged to see a maid for anything other than a maid, because they don't see a person. If you don't humanize and see someone for who they are, if you cannot see a people, how can you ever see their pain? How can you ever appreciate their frustration?
Woo, that's big.
So that sort of willful blindness and knowing that you are just being ignorant to the fact is wrong.
Yes.
We live in a society today where it is more important to be first with the news than it is to be first with the truth.
Ooh,
we live in a society today where it is more important to have the numbers of a news cycle, to be, what is it called, viral,
right,
than it is more important to be accurate.
Exactly.
Than it is to be consistent.
Exactly.
Because, we'll just print a retraction. People are not focused on the truth. In this last national election, we heard new terminology come out like alternative truth. What is an alternative truth? It's either true or it's false.
Right.
Alternative facts. It's spin, ladies and gentlemen, and if you allow yourself to be spent, if you allow yourself to be confused by the noise, then you are missing the point.
Exactly.
And that's where the bait and switch comes in. Because a lot of these bills that get passed, it's the fine print that scares me.
Right.
It's all the stuff that is packaged into that deal. Well, we're going to do this and we're going to give you that. But on the low, they're taking everything they can from you. And they're lining their pockets and ensuring a succession of wealth for their family, for their children, and for their friends.
Wow, well said.
Is it any wonder everyone is now rushing to legalize cannabis, but yet you demonize a whole community of people for selling the very thing that you say now is legal.
Right, that you're going to charge taxes and make money off.
You put people in prison, had them languish in anxiety and fear and in trepidation in the most
for the very thing that you're allowed
heinous situation.
Yes, yeah.
But now you want to legalize it. Now it's okay. Now you have people saying, I have a dispensary. I'm a cannabis dealer. Now you're a drug dealer, just like Ray and Pookie. But Ray and Pookie, they had to go do 5 to 10, and now when they get out, they can't even go into the business that they know better than anything else in life.
Right.
Because they got a criminal record. Ain't that the pot calling the kettle black?
Man, exactly. And
how do you lock a man up for selling something that you now say is legal? but yet when he comes home, he can't participate in that line of work.
Right, man. I'm telling you, the odds are definitely stacked against our community, man. And it was well said, Scott Knight, man. It's a pleasure to have you on, man. As always, man. And hoping to do more work with you in the future.
It is a pleasure.
But look, let me say this.
To be here.
Because I want the people to know that you are someone who's in the community and that's out here doing things. Recently, I just seen you on stage giving a speech at the Goodwill Community Foundation. Before we go, tell us a little bit about that. We got 4 minutes.
Yes, I was recently the keynote speaker last Thursday, in fact, in Columbia, South Carolina, for Goodwill Industries, the Goodwill store that you see downtown where you donate your clothes and old furniture and things of that nature. Well, Goodwill is more than a thrift shop. They have a job connections department that actually provides the resources and funding for individuals to get jobs and, more importantly, to get trained so that they can then get a better job or get a job.
Right.
So Goodwill is doing some very good works in our community. They have boots on the ground. There are resources available. If you're not familiar with the Goodwill and if you're looking to change the dynamic or the trajectory of your life, I wholeheartedly encourage you to go to your local Goodwill and go into the Job Connection Department and speak with one of the talented staff that they have and see what sort of resources and opportunities are available. Everything from college to technical schools to hands-on masonry training. They have vocational training. They will provide you with the funding to get that training, and they will provide you with any resources to follow up throughout your training. So I was invited because of my career path and the moves that I have made over the last year. Goodwill actually gave me a $5,000 scholarship to take a CDL class, which I took back in May. And since taking that class, I have now created my own trucking company, which is called Knight Transportation Enterprises, LLC. We have semi-tractor trailer trucks, and we're moving dry freight. Very good business. It's been very, very, very beneficial. But none of the moves from a business acquisition standpoint could have been made without the Goodwill doing what they did and providing the resources for me. I literally went in on a Thursday. I got the scholarship the following Tuesday. I started class the following Wednesday. 7 weeks later, or 6 weeks later, I got my CDL on a Friday. On that Monday, the following Monday, we went about the work of setting up our company. By Wednesday of that week, we were actually boots on the ground working.
Wow, that was fast.
We now have a viable company on the ground, up and running, and we hope to employ other individuals, and I hope to be able to pass on this benefit and give back not just to my community, but I want to be able to contribute positively to the economy as well. That's what it's about. We've got to build bridges. We've got to build bridges. Absolutely.
We're going to get more into that some other time. Look, shout out to Goodwill, because that was huge, and that played an instrumental part in your success and you getting your company and all those things, man. Shout out to you, man. Shout out to the people out there listening to this show, man. And let me just say, if you out there listening, man, look, be active in your community, man. Go vote, man. Listen, we got to start looking into these candidates. We got to start doing our research, trying to figure out what policies they represent, what special interest groups do candidates represent. We got to start holding each other accountable in our own communities, man. This is what Factz is about, man. And today, man, look, the show with Scott Knight, man, your host, man, E. Dale, a.k.a. Mr. Factz, man. Until next time, I'll see you.
So now, ladies and gentlemen, it is start time. Are you ready for start time? Thank you, and thank you very kindly. It is indeed a great pleasure to present to you at this particular time.
Boy, E. Dale, a.k.a. Mr. Factz, man.
That's facts.
Kick the truth to the young black youth.
That's facts.